Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now, the weekend is over, unfortunately, but this does mean that the latest round of Premier League fixtures has been completed. But what have we learnt? Well, in this video, we'll list the top 5 things we took away from this round of the Premier League. But before we get started, please make sure to subscribe down below. It helps the channel a lot, and we really are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2022. Can you help us make that happen? Click the big red button down below. So, of course, the first talking point will be Liverpool versus Manchester United. But what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt that the foundations are definitely in place for Erik ten Hag's side as they emerged victorious 2-1 against a poor Liverpool side. Now, Liverpool were horrendous in the first 45 minutes, and nothing sort of made this stand out more than by seeing the fact that Milner and Henderson are starting together in 2022 really doesn't fill any Liverpool fan with a lot of hope going into a fixture as big as this one. A victory was needed to lift them out of the slump that had arisen from the first 2 games being drawn, but now they seem to be in a real problem, and I think a midfielder has to be a priority in the last couple of weeks of this window, if there's enough time, of course, to get that deal done. But if we look at the teams, you can see that there's this new look side with Maguire and Ronaldo being taken out by Ten Hag, and Malacia coming in, of course, which is a great shout from the manager. And I think that Liverpool is becoming a little bit stagnant. I mentioned this in one of the previous What We Learned videos, because there's no competition for places, as no new players have been brought in for that midfield to really give it that sort of kick that maybe they need now, going into what has been quite a long time that they've been playing together. But 9 players out through injury and 1 with suspension also doesn't help, but these are excuses at the end of the day. A Liverpool side that has won everything they can win needs to show up in a game like this, and I think when you look at stats with Van Dijk making 0 successful tackles, that's horrendous. And for a player that's considered to be one of the best in his position, it's not good enough. If we look at the first goal, he stood still, and Milner's the only one that really tries to make an attempt by sliding. Admittedly, Sancho sells him the dummy and finishes calmly into the bottom corner. And then the second goal is a counter-attack released by, of all players, Jordan Henderson, who then kicks it against Van Dijk, and Rashford's able to then run on in behind. However, as much as we criticise Liverpool, Man United were good, and for me, Malacia was the standout man with incredible stats, and I think that he's a real star moving forward for Manchester United and has to start all of the games. I think he's so much better than Shaw at such a young age, and I think Erik ten Hag does now have faith in him following this result against Liverpool. So if we look at the average positions for the Liverpool side, you can see that it's quite narrow, and a lot more narrow than they usually would like to play, with Trent operating again in that sort of deep-lying midfield on average. But this then also impacts further up the pitch. When you're used to the fullbacks being wider, it also allows for the wide wingers to also operate in that area and to receive passes in from those positions. But my concern is the midfield. You've got Bobby Firmino and James Milner here sort of overlapping each other and really congesting a midfield that didn't offer anything. And it's really not very positive. And I don't think any side who's looking to finish in as high a position as Liverpool should be playing these players. You wouldn't see Man City or Arsenal with this kind of midfield. That's the thing I took away from this game. But what have we learnt? Well, as we mentioned earlier, there are foundations in place for Erik ten Hag, and I do think this is going to give them the boost that they really needed following their 2 defeats in their first 3 games. But this is now a turning point, and they have to make the most of this momentum in order to finish higher up the table than a lot of fans thought they would last week. Now, in a year where the Premier League is celebrating its 30th anniversary, we may have seen a classic match of all time, but certainly one of the games of the season, and of course I'm talking about Newcastle versus Manchester City. Scoring after only 5 minutes, Gundogan put the away side in the driving seat, and it looked like it was going to be more business as usual for Pep Guardiola's side. That was until Miguel Almiron managed to somehow get the ball into the back of the net using his knee, falling over. A phenomenal goal if you're Miguel Almiron, when he's been waiting to score in the league for the last 18 months. However, this goal seemed to change the tide in the first half, as Callum Wilson would then go on to double the goal tally for the home side, making it 2-1 going into half-time. Kieran Trippier, former Manchester City Academy player, would then go on to make it 3-1 in the 54th minute, driving a free kick across the goalkeeper into his side, hitting the side netting and raising the roof of St James's Park. However, Manchester City would then go on to show how they are the champions in 4 of the last 5 Premier League campaigns, scoring through Erling Haaland, and then of course finishing the game off scoring through Bernardo Silva following an incredible Kevin De Bruyne through ball. A lot of debate was had whether Manchester City weren't good enough or were Newcastle really, really good, but I think both managers have positives and negatives to take away from the game. Pep's side showed a lot of determination to come back from 3-1 down, and Eddie Howe's side showed that they can play against the big boys. And I think that looking at the heat map of Newcastle United, it's clear that they focus predominantly on protecting their 18-yard box, and of course any team would against Manchester City, but they managed to do it so convincingly for the majority of the game. But eventually the quality of Man City was going to come through. But when they did attack, they utilised the wings significantly, and what appeared to me was that using Alan Saint-Maximin against Kyle Walker proved to be successful. And I think that that's interesting because when we think of Kyle Walker, he is one of the most dominant right-backs that has been in the English game for the last few years. And for someone such as Saint-Maximin to get the better of him on a few occasions shows that there is so much quality in this little Frenchman. But is he consistent enough to do it in the Premier League on a regular basis? I guess time will tell under Eddie Howe. But the standout man for Newcastle was, of course, him, as he was constantly providing opportunities, creating 2 big chances, the most out of any of the Newcastle players on the day. And he showed that creativity, energy and flair that we're accustomed to seeing isn't showing any signs of letting up. What have we learnt? Well, I think we've learnt that Newcastle are definitely up for it this season, and they can definitely be considered to be dark horses for the European spots. I think Eddie Howe's got a team there that are working tremendously well together, and they have really gelled over the last year or so that he's been in charge. So I think we may have to get used to seeing more of Newcastle at the top of the table coming by the end of this season. Up next, we head to London with Spurs versus Wolves, which was less than a classic compared to Newcastle versus Manchester City. But with 0 wins in their last 10 games, Bruno Lage's side have started the 22-23 season as they ended the previous campaign. But why is this the case? Well, statistically, they're averaging a good, healthy possession percentage of 56.6 in all 3 of their games so far. But they're conceding an average of a goal a game, which doesn't sound awful, but when you've only created 3 chances in 3 games, or 3 big chances in 3 games, that's where the warning signs are starting to appear. Yet in their latest match against Spurs, Wolves were on top for the majority of the first 45 minutes, and that's an occurrence which wasn't too dissimilar when Spurs faced Chelsea last time out. Despite having 12 shots, 7 of these were off target, including Matheus Nunes having a header go wide of the left-hand post and scuffing a shot at the nearest post as well within the first half. And I think that in order to get the best out of him, you're going to need to have him train with the squad for a lot longer than he's already had. So what have we learned? Well, I think that with the team that have scored the least amount of goals in the Premier League last season, of the teams that didn't get relegated, they really need to start finding their form up front. And whether this is through Nunez, whether this is through Neto, who has been heavily linked with Arsenal in recent days, or even with Jimenez coming back into the side, I don't think they can rely on that defensive strength that they had last season. They've just let their captain go on loan to Everton, and maybe there's a few gaps that are starting to appear there. But the way in which the goal happened, and Harry Kane almost have an empty net to tap into, and this is because that Nathan Collins was marking him, and Kane's intelligent movement managed to get him from one side to another, and look, Collins lost his man. So an individual error for the goal. However, they just need to find this form up front, and I think they need their new signings to start firing. Otherwise, it could be a very long season for the West Midlands club. Focusing on a team that are starting to become the success story of the Premier League and a little bit of a surprise for everyone is Fulham. After emerging victorious in a 5-goal thriller at Craven Cottage, Fulham have now picked up more points in 2 games than they had in their first 6 Premier League games last time out in the league. So this symbolised the development of Fulham, and following their promotion, they've really shown a style that Marco Silva wants to implement. I think what's clear as a squad is they have this never say die attitude, which couldn't be better symbolised than a Mitrovic goal in the 90th minute, securing the 3 points for the home side. Speaking of Mitrovic, he seems to be a different player this season, and that's not a surprise to people that watched him in the Championship last year, as he broke the record for total goals scored. But it's not just the goals that we're giving him credit for. It's despite scoring 3 goals in 3 games, he's now adapted his own game and isn't just the target man that many people remembered him as. The 6'4" Serbian's footwork and close control has made him a real threat, not just as the man to look for, but as someone that can be involved in the build-up play as well. With a progressive carry percentage of 57.6%, this build-up play can now go through him, leading to overlaps and other options driving forward to give Fulham more attacking options. Despite having less possession against Brentford, Fulham created more chances, and not only did they create more chances, but the creation metrics are changing in the way in which they play football now. They're not just spamming crosses as many people believe that they could do with Mitrovic up front, but their shorter progressive passes rate has gone up as well. This has gone from 31% last year to 47% since the start of this season, which is quite a big improvement and shows that Marco Silva really is getting the football he wants out of this side now. So what have we learned? This side is an adaptable underdog, and I think that this is going to be a season that they prove that they may be able to stay up in the Premier League. They're not the same Fulham we've seen before. There's a real character to the players in this side, and I think they might only get better as the season continues. But what do you think? Do you think Fulham have enough to stay up this year? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll get back to everyone that comments. Now, the final thing we learnt from this weekend is that Leicester seem to be in trouble, and I'm not quite sure how they fix this without getting rid of Brendan Rodgers. They are desperately underperforming with a weak squad depth and players that are only getting older. They haven't even replaced their club captain in Kasper Schmeichel, who went to Nice, and I think that's initially you need a good goalkeeper, and I don't think Danny Ward quite has the capabilities to be that first choice for Leicester. They've dropped points from winning positions in both of the last 2 games, notably at Arsenal, where they conceded directly after they scored twice in just a space of a minute between when they scored. And is this something that we can tie to mentality? I'm not too sure. But despite having 62% possession against Southampton, they managed just 1 shot on target and had 0 big chances. So maybe it's the defence, the midfield and the attack that needs something to change, or maybe we need to look at the head of the team in the coach. And there's been heavy rumours that Brendan Rodgers is set to be sacked by Leicester. Whether this happens, I guess this video will only go out to be either seen in a good way or a bad way. But I think he may have done as much as he can, especially with players being linked with moves away, such as Maddison earlier in the window with Newcastle and Fofana and Chelsea more recently. So what have we learned? Well, it's worrying times at Leicester, and I think Brendan Rodgers may have had his time there. I don't know if there's more he can do without them bringing in the players that maybe he wants. But at the same time, you've got to pick these players up as a manager, and I don't think he's got the ability to do that. So finally, FPL pick for game week 4, and I don't think this will surprise many people given how well he's played in the first 3 games in a new league, but I'm going with Brendan Aronson from Leeds. His adaptation to the league, his ability and his desire couldn't have been better displayed than with him chasing down Edouard Mendy, picking the pocket of the Chelsea goalkeeper and tapping home into an empty net. He has been electric for Leeds, and I think that looking forward, I think he is a solid pick to have in your team. At 5.5 million, he isn't the most expensive option either, and I think he could add real value to your fantasy Premier League squad. So those are the 5 things we learned in this game week. Are there any things I've missed? Please let me know down below. I'd be delighted to read your comments and see what you took away from game week 3. As always, if you enjoyed, please hit subscribe and please like the video, and stay tuned for more sports content coming your way very, very soon.